Welcome to the Sleepy Tales podcast, a solo media production. Tonight's story is called The Lantern in the Woods. The evening was cool and quiet as a gentle breeze swept through the tall, ancient trees of Everwood Forest. It brought with it the earthy scent of pine, moss, and wildflowers, and the whispers from rustling leaves seemed to echo secrets from a time long past. Above, the sky stretched in a deep, velvety blue, slowly darkening as dusk slipped quietly over the land. Tiny stars began to awaken one by one, glittering like little beacons against the growing darkness. At the edge of the village, nestled under a tree, was an old cottage, small and inviting, with ivy creeping up its walls and colorful flowers blooming along its path. This was the home of Alden, the lantern keeper. Alden was an elderly man with kind eyes and a soft smile, his hair white as the snow that blanketed the forest in winter, and his hands worn yet steady from a lifetime of gentle work. Each evening, as the last of the daylight faded, Alden would step out of his cottage, taking with him a brass lantern that glowed with a warm, golden light. Alden's nightly rounds were a tradition. For as long as anyone could remember, he had been the one to walk the winding trails of Everwood, lighting the lanterns that were carefully placed along the paths. It was said that these lanterns were enchanted, casting a calm, steady glow that made the forest feel safe and welcoming. Travelers often spoke of the comforting sight of Alden's lights glowing in the distance, little stars lighting the way home. Alden loved his role as a lantern keeper. Every night he would walk the trail slowly, breathing in the cool air, his footsteps soft on the mossy ground. The forest was alive with quiet sounds, the chirp of crickets, the occasional rustle of a small creature in the underbrush, the gentle hoot of an owl hidden among the branches. It was a symphony of calm, and Alden felt at peace within, knowing he was part of something larger than himself. One particular evening, as Alden made his way down the familiar paths, he noticed something unusual. Just as he was about to light one of the lanterns along the main trail, he saw a faint light flickering off in the distance. It was barely visible through the trees, a soft glow that seemed to dance like a firefly on the breeze. Curious, Alden adjusted his lantern, letting its lights illuminate the path ahead, and slowly followed the flickering glow. His footsteps were quiet, careful not to disturb the sleeping forest as he ventured off the main trail and into the small clearing. There, nestled at the base of the ancient oak tree, was a tiny silver lantern. The lantern was quite exquisite, unlike any he had ever seen before. It was crafted from silver and covered with intricate carvings of leaves, stars, and spirals that seemed to shimmer in the faint light. In the center was a crystal that glowed softly, pulsing with a gentle rhythm, almost as if it were alive. Alden knelt down, reaching out to touch the lantern, and as his fingers brushed against its cool surface, a soft voice filled the clearing. "Thank you for finding me," the voice said, gentle and kind, like the whisper of a breeze through the leaves. Alden looked around, startled, but there was no one there, only the little lantern glowing softly. He smiled, feeling a warmth spread through his heart as he realized the voice was coming from the lantern itself. "I was left here long ago," the lantern continued, its light flickering as it spoke. "I once guided travelers through these woods, just as you do now. But over the years, I was forgotten, and my light grew dim." Alden's heart softened as he looked at the little lantern. "Well, it seems we share a purpose, you and I," he said kindly. "Perhaps we can work together to bring light to the forest once more." The lantern's glow brightened slightly, as if it were smiling. "I would like that very much," it replied, "but my light is weak. I can only shine with the help of another." Alden thought for a moment, then gently lifted the little lantern, hanging it carefully beside his brass one. "Then we shall work together," he said with a smile. "I'll share my light with you, and perhaps in time your glow will return." With the silver lantern by his side, Alden continued his journey through the forest, lighting each lantern along the way. The soft, silvery glow of a little lantern mingled with the warm light of his own, casting a gentle radiance that seemed to dance with the shadows of the trees. The forest felt different that night. as if the trees themselves were watching, their leaves rustling in quiet approval. As they walked, the animals of the forest began to notice the strange, beautiful light. A curious fox with a thick, bushy tail darted out from behind a tree, its amber eyes glinting in the lantern's glow. It paused, watching Alden and the little lantern with a look of wonder before disappearing back into the underbrush. Birds, that usually slept at night, fluttered quietly from branch to branch, their feathers ruffled as they settled closer to the lantern, blinking sleepily in the soft light. Even the owls, usually hidden in the deep shadows, emerged to watch, their large eyes shining like golden coins in the night. Alden smiled, feeling the presence of the forest creatures as they accompanied him. It was as though the entire forest had gathered to witness the reunion of the old lantern keeper and his newfound companion. As the night went on, Alden and the little lantern became inseparable. Each evening, they would walk the trails together, lighting the paths with their combined glow. And with each step, the little lantern's light grew brighter. Its silvery radiance mingled with the golden warmth of Alden's brass lantern. One clear night, when the sky was particularly bright with stars, the little lantern pulsed with an even stronger light, casting a glow that seemed to reach out to every tree, every leaf, and every shadow. Alden noticed that the lantern was guiding him somewhere, its light leading him deeper into the forest than he had ever ventured before. After a while, they came to a large, ancient tree standing alone in a small grove. Its branches were twisted and wise, and its bark was covered in moss that shimmered faintly in the lantern's silvery light. At the base of the tree was a hollow, and inside, Alden saw a small book resting on a bed of soft moss. The little lantern's voice was softer now, almost like a whisper in the wind. "This is my story," it said, "a story of light that once guided many travelers before finding rest here." Alden knelt down, reaching out to pick up the book. The cover was decorated with the same intricate patterns as the little lantern, and as he opened it, he felt a deep calm settle over him. The pages were filled with tales of wanderers who had journeyed through the forest, stories of moonlit paths and starlit journeys, each one a testament to the light that had guided them. Some stories were joyful, others tingled with sadness, but each one spoke of hope, of finding one's way even in the darkest nights. As Alden read, he felt the weight of the lantern's history, the countless lives it had touched, the quiet strength it had given to those who were lost. The little lantern's light grew softer, as if it were preparing to rest. "Thank you, Alden," it whispered. "You have given me a chance to shine again, to share my story one last time. Now I can rest." With a gentle smile, Alden placed the little lantern back at the base of the tree next to the book. "Your light will always be a part of this forest," he said softly, "and I'll continue to light the way for both of us." As he rose to leave, Alden felt a sense of peace and gratitude. He continued his rounds with a renewed purpose, knowing that he wasn't just lighting the way for others, but honoring the spirit of the little lantern. And the villagers, when they walked the forest paths at night, often felt a gentle calming presence, as if the very trees were watching over them, filled with the quiet, enduring light. And so the forest remained a place of peace and wonder, with the lantern keeper, and his light guiding all who wandered through, under the starlit sky and the gentle glow of the moon. As weeks turned into months, Alden found himself reflecting more and more on the tales within the little lantern's book. Each story had its own lesson, its own light to share. One evening, as he walked with the little lantern illuminating the path beside him, he pondered how he might share these stories with the villagers. "Perhaps it's time for a gathering," Alden thought aloud, his voice barely louder than the whispering leaves. "A chance to share the magic of the forest and the stories it holds." That night, he returned home and began planning. He gathered fresh parchment, ink, and quills, and carefully began to write down the stories he had read in the little lantern's book. Each tale flowed from his heart, weaving in his own experiences as a lantern keeper, and soon he had a small collection that felt right. The following evening, Alden visited the village square, a cozy gathering place where villagers often came to share news and enjoy each other's company. The square was bustling with life as children laughed, vendors called out their wares, and families chatted around the square. "Excuse me," Alden called out, raising his hands to gather everyone's attention. The chatter softened, and curious eyes turned towards him. "I would like to invite you all to an evening of stories from the forest. Gather around the old oak tree tomorrow night, and I will share you tales of light and adventure." A murmur of excitement rippled through the crowd. Villagers nodded in agreement, some exchanging glances that spoke of nostalgia for the tales they had heard as children. Alden smiled, his heart warming at their enthusiasm. The next evening, as twilight descended over the village, Alden made his way back to the oak tree with a blanket and his collection of stories. Lanterns dotted the village, casting flickering shadows against the cool earth, while the sky above transformed into a canvas of stars. As the villagers began to gather, Alden arranged the blanket beneath the sprawling branches of the oak. Children sat cross-legged at the front, their eyes wide with anticipation, while adults found spots behind them, leaning in to hear the tales. The air was filled with the soft sound of laughter and whispered chatter, creating a sense of community and warmth. Once everyone had settled, Alden stood up and smiled at the crowd. "Thank you all for coming. Tonight, I want to share the stories that have guided many through the woods, stories that carry the light of hope and adventure." He began with the first tale, recounting the story of a young traveler who lost his way in a storm, but found shelter in the forest, guided by a faint light that flickered like a firefly. As Alden spoke, the children leaned in closer, their imaginations igniting with each word. He described how the traveler learned to listen to the whispers of the trees, how they offered shelter and guidance when he felt lost and afraid. With each story, Alden noticed the reactions of his audience. Gasps of surprise punctuated his tales, and laughter erupted at the humorous moments. The adults exchanged knowing glances, memories flooding back of their own childhood adventures in the forest, where shadows seemed to dance and the trees whispered secrets. Alden shared tale after tale, each one brimming with warmth and wisdom. He spoke of brave women and men, of kindness and courage, and the light that each person carried within them. The silver lantern glimmered softly beside him, a gentle reminder of the magic that lingered in the air. As the night wore on, the stars twinkled overhead, twinkling in rhythm with Alden's stories. He shared a story about a family who had found a hidden glen filled with luminescent flowers, their glow guiding them home on a dark night. Another tale spoke of a wise old owl that watched over the forest, guiding lost souls with her soothing wisdom and soft hoots. The villagers were captivated, their hearts touched by the lessons woven into each narrative. They could almost feel the light of the lantern surrounding them, the warmth and safety of the stories wrapping around them like a familiar blanket. Finally, as the moon hung high in the sky, casting a silver glow over the gathering, Alden prepared to share the last story, the one about the little lantern that had brought him so much joy and purpose. "This is a story of friendship," Alden began, his voice gentle yet strong. "Once in this very forest, there was a little silver lantern, forgotten and left to dim. But it was discovered by a kind-hearted lantern keeper, much like myself, who recognized its worth and beauty. Together they journeyed through the woods, lighting the way for all who wandered, filling the forest with hope." As he spoke of their adventures, the villagers listened intently, their eyes sparkled with wonder. Alden described how the little lantern had grown bright again, reminding everyone of the power of companionship and kindness. "When we share our light, we illuminate the paths for others," he concluded, his voice filled with emotion. "And that light will always return us in unexpected ways." As he finished the story, silence enveloped the grove. The villagers absorbed his voice, feeling the weight of the moment. Then a ripple of applause erupted, echoing through the trees as cheers filled the air. Alden smiled, his heart swelling with gratitude for the connection they all shared that night. After the gathering, many villagers stayed behind to chat and reminisce about their own stories in the woods. Laughter and joy filled the air as they shared tales of childhood adventures, of nights spent camping beneath the stars, and of the magic they once felt. Alden felt a sense of fulfillment that he hadn't experienced in years. As the night deepened, he took a moment to gaze up at the stars, feeling the presence of the little lantern beside him, its soft glow still shining. It was a reminder that stories had the power to connect them all, weaving their lives together in a tapestry of light. From that day forward, Alden made storytelling a regular part of the village life. Each month he hosted gatherings where villagers would share their own stories, bringing new tales to the old oak tree under the stars. The little lantern stood proudly beside Alden's brass one, a symbol of the friendship and hope that illuminated their lives. As the seasons changed, the village thrived with renewed energy. Children eagerly awaited each gathering, their eyes wide with wonder as they listened to the stories of their parents and grandparents. Alden found joy in encouraging the villagers to share their own experiences through laughter echoing through the forest like music. As autumn approached, the leaves transformed into brilliant shades of gold, crimson, and amber. The air turned crisp and the scent of wood smoke filled the village as families prepared for the harvest festival. Alden decided it was a perfect occasion to hold a grand storytelling night. On the night of the festival, lanterns adorned every corner of the village, their soft glow illuminating the faces of the villagers as they gathered around the old oak tree. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement, and the sound of music floated through the air. Children played games while adults shared food and laughter. As darkness fell, Alden stepped forward, holding the silver lantern in one hand and the brass in the other. "Welcome, dear friends," he called out, his voice carrying through the night. "Tonight we celebrate the light that lives within us all. I invite you to share your stories as the lanterns share their glow." The villagers cheered, their hearts filled with joy as they settled in for the night of tales. One by one, they took turns sharing their stories, each one a reflection of their lives in the village and the lessons they had learned along the way. Laughter rang out, tears were shed, and a profound sense of connection enveloped them all. As the final story came to an end and the villagers erupted into applause, Alden gazed up at the night sky, the stars twinkling brightly as if winking down at them, and he felt a profound sense of gratitude for the community that had grown around him. As years passed, Alden grew older, his hair now completely silver and his steps slower, but his heart remained young and vibrant. The village flourished, with children growing into adults, carrying the stories they had heard into their own lives. Alden became known as the wise elder of the village, the keeper of stories and the guardian of the lanterns. The gatherings continued growing larger and more vibrant with each year passing. Eventually, the time came for Alden to pass on his role as a lantern keeper to the next generation. He had seen many seasons come and go, the forest change and flourish, and he knew it was time to share the responsibility of guiding the village. One beautiful spring evening, Alden called the villagers together once more under the old oak tree. The air was fragrant with blooming flowers, and the stars began to twinkle overhead. As they gathered, he felt a mix of nostalgia and pride. "Dear friends," he began, his voice steady yet filled with emotion, "I have had the honor of being the lantern keeper for many years. Together, we have shared stories that have lit our paths and brought us closer as a community." The villagers listened attentively, their faces illuminated by the gentle glow of lanterns scattered through the grove. "It is time for me to pass on this role to someone new," Alden continued, "a new lantern keeper who will carry on the tradition of lighting our paths and sharing the stories of our forest." Murmurs of surprise and curiosity swept through the crowd. Who would take on such an important role? Alden turned to a young woman standing near the front. Her name was Alara, and she had often joined him during his evening walks through the forest. With her keen sense of adventure and her gentle heart, she embodied the spirit of the forest. "Alara," he called gently, and she stepped forward, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Will you accept the role of lantern keeper?" The crowd felt silent, all eyes on her. Alara glanced around at the familiar faces of her friends and neighbors, and then back at Alden, who was smiling warmly at her. "Yes, I would be honored," she replied, her voice steady. A wave of applause erupted from the villagers, echoing through the night, celebrating her acceptance. Alden handed Alara the silver lantern, its glow brightening as it rested in her hands. "May this lantern guide you, just as it guided me. And remember, it's not the light that matters, but the stories we share to keep the spirit of the forest alive. With tears of joy in her eyes, Alara nodded, "I promise to honor the stories and the light." Alden knew that the legacy of the Lantern Keeper was in good hands. Alara would walk the trails, sharing tales and lighting the way for generations to come. As time went on, Alara became a beloved figure in the village. Under her guidance, the storytelling nights flourished, and she brought fresh tales of her own adventures in the forest. The little silver lantern, now shining brighter than ever, became a symbol of hope and unity. Alden watched with pride as the community thrived, knowing that he had played a part in nurturing this bond. And while he slowly stepped back from his role, the spirit of the lantern and the forest remained alive within him. Years passed, and the seasons continued to change. Alden often found himself sitting by the window of his cottage, gazing at the forest. He could see the light of Alara's lantern moving gracefully among the trees, guiding the villagers as they explored the woods. And so, the legacy of the Lantern Keeper lived on, carried by the hearts of the villagers and the stories that wove their lives together like the roots of the great oak tree. The forest remained a place of magic, adventure, and light, forever whispering its secrets to those willing to listen. Thank you for listening to The Lantern in the Woods. Sleep well. Good night.